About is actually CML Advocates Network and Europe, and I just wanted to highlight we've grown tremendously over the past years, and I mean this meeting is probably a reflection of that we have people from all continents coming to a single place to learn, share and grow. And in the same way the network has grown over the past years. We are now at 87 CML organizations in 67 countries, and 32 of them are in wider Europe. And I'm saying wider Europe because we always think about Europe on one hand as something like the United States of Europe or something, and we are also thinking about what is the EU or what we read about all the, let's say, the rich part of Europe, but this is not the case. Europe is very diverse, and that's what I want to address actually in this presentation a bit, to give you a feeling of the challenges all across Europe that we have in CML. And that's why, first of all, just for those that are not from Europe, how are we organized over here? The European Union as such has already 28 member states, and I was smiling a bit when I was thinking about language problems. I sometimes go to the European Commission, to the government of the EU, and we have simultaneous translation for 8 languages, and that just covers a couple of the 24 official languages we have in the European Union. We have 28 different health systems because on one hand we are approving medicines from a central agency, but then every country decides in their own healthcare system what is available to patients, what kind of care is available, how they organize it and so on. So Europe, I would say health-wise, often doesn't exist, so it completely fragments on the national level, which is sometimes really a challenge, especially when it comes down to access, and I'm going to touch that in a minute. We have strict EU legislation, so being part of the EU has some advantages because most of the health system is really decentralized. Every member state decides, but on a couple of things like the regulation on clinical trials, like on drug safety and so on, these things are centrally regulated, and the European Union is trying more and more to harmonize that because trials don't happen on the national level, trials happen on the global or European level, and for the region to stay competitive, we need to work together under harmonized rules. There's a new EU policy which is extremely important for us. It's a cross-border directive, what we say, because on one hand reimbursement is national. This law will actually allow patients to move across the border and get health services in other countries as long as this is being reimbursed in their national country. Sounds quite technical, but what it actually does, it will not allow patients to mobilize, but it will mobilize knowledge between Europe, because then competition starts between member countries, and this will help us a great lot, because in this law, heavy lobbying of the patient organization has also enabled us to put patients' rights into that law. So patients have a right to be reimbursed in a different country if they are reimbursed in their home country for certain things. So that basically starts to have competition for best care across Europe, so it helps. The European Union as such has a multi-billion health research program that it funds, so it funds a lot of research actions. The European Leukemia Net has originally been financed from European funds, but of course these funds end, and afterwards they need to stand on their own feet. And I would say, because Seng Jen, I think, was addressing that, there's a strong patient voice over the years. We've done a lot to work with the European government in ECPC, where Jana is very active, in the European Patients Forum and so on, to put cancer and to put rare diseases on the agenda. And I would say a lot of laws in the past years have been passed to increase the rights, the care, the national plans for rare diseases and cancer. So there's a lot of progress on that. But this is just the European Union and 28 member states of a much wider region, which I want to address, because if we talk about 24 official languages in 28 member states, there are many more countries around that. In Western Europe, Switzerland, Norway are not part of the EU, but also the Eastern European countries. I call it Western Asian countries. It's very difficult because geographically many countries are already on Asia, but they're culturally probably more close to Europe than they are to the Pacific region. And that's why we always struggle. We keep discussing who's part of if we put the members on CML Advocates, who's part of Asia, Pacific, who's part of Europe. It's very difficult on the countries that are very much on the eastern border. And we are, of course, the Balkan countries, Serbia. We're going to hear a lot about that over the next couple of days. And so more languages, more healthcare systems, more authorities that have their own say in healthcare. So it's very difficult to present about Europe. And many of you, this conference was keeping us busy quite a bit, so I sent it later than I anticipated. I made a survey of the European groups, and I think 22 organizations responded to the survey, because I wanted to get a clear picture of what you're doing on a national level, what kind of drugs you have access to, and what kind of diagnostics. And you can see, I've just clustered a bit by colors, where you can see Western Europe and the main challenges. Western Europe is basically, drug access is quite good. Not everyone has access to every drug, but I would say for everyone there's a second generation drug available in some way. Adherence is a big issue, quality, no variations of quality of care, management of quality of life, stopping treatment is a hot topic. So I would say these are the main issues being discussed more in Western Europe. If you go to it in the Eastern EU, so the EU countries still in the European Union, we see TKI generics because the patent expired earlier than in Western Europe. So 10 EU member states already have EMA approved generics or about to get them. We get first experience with that. And of course, access to quality of care, access to diagnostics, access to second, third generation TKIs, access to trials are issues there. Then I put Southeast Europe, and it's always a bit difficult because Croatia just joined the European Union. It's a bit difficult to talk about it, and Jelena could do that much better than I do, or Pepo from Macedonia or others. Drug supply came up in our survey. Imatinib copies is a hot topic that keeps a lot of people very busy. And then if we go to even the region much east of that, what is called Eastern Europe, West Asia, in my strange definition, it's access to drugs, it's access to labs, it's imatinib copies, it's even second generation TKI is very rare, access to quality of care. So I hope I'm fair to use these kind of colors, but you can see if you talk about Europe, you can hardly talk about Europe because many of the problems we see in the eastern part are very similar to what we see in Latin America or in Asia. And many of the Western issues are quite close to some areas in North America. So how do we talk about Europe? It's not so easy. But what I want to cover a bit is what initiatives do the CML groups, what do they do? And it's quite difficult to summarize so many groups. So I just clustered it into patient support, into health policy and campaigning, into research collaboration. In patient support, of course, we have the support meetings, we have national seminars, we are producing patient information, and that's one of the challenges we have in Europe. It's not like we're having a single language that works across Europe. We hardly have any country that speaks the same language like its neighboring countries. So for us, as patient organizations, whatever we do in Germany is unusable in most of the other countries, just as an example. So many of you are translating medical info like our ASH reports into local language. Many of the CML groups are grassroots organizations, so they have grown from the internet or grown from initiatives from many of you. And adherence programs with psychologists were actually mentioned. You can see some photos of what you submitted, what the European group submitted at World CML Day last year and the year before. So we've seen a lot of activity on World CML Day also in Europe. Then on health policy and campaigning, of course, events on World CML Day were quite nice and were great, and in some countries really very engaged. And of course, lobbying the ministries of health, the governments, on patients' rights and access is quite prominent for many of our groups. And then collaborating with CML research organizations, for those that attended the parallel session on research this morning, for example, groups in France, in the Netherlands, in Italy, in Germany are working very closely with hematologists on different levels and are trying to get the patient voice into trial design, trial conduct, dissemination of results, and so on. So some groups are very active on that level as well. So
I was dreaming on the time. I'll put a yellow card for you.
Okay,
so the time is.
I'm going quick. We have a couple of more minutes. I'm the first one to get this. Isn't this embarrassing? Very quickly, we have been collaborating with EHA very closely, and we have established over the last 4 years, mainly led by the CML community, but it's a movement across the hematology patient organizations. We have a program within the scientific program of EHA for hematologists, where we addressed issues like this year generics and young people and old people's diseases, access to clinical trials, research collaboration, and so on. And we have negotiated 53 registrations for patient advocates. We have a free exhibition booth for organizations and so on. And for those Europeans that have the chance to go to EHA, that's really good. And like I'm not going into this, like I said, we work very closely with some of the research groups, which is extremely valuable for us, like the French, the German, and the Italian CML research group. Then we have a CML work group that was initiated and supported by BMS, where we had a couple of things that you've experienced on the global level, like the ELN recommendations actually started in that group as a European activity and then became global. We did the first pilot survey in adherence in 8 countries to test more or less the approach of the adherence survey before we then did the global survey, which rolled out in 79 countries. We developed a couple of educational videos on adherence, side effect management, and monitoring, and many of them have been dubbed in Chinese and in other languages already, and they are on the CML Advocates Network website. And you can see the team that has worked together on that, and this team is now working on the 2013 summary of the ELN recommendations, so that's one of the next steps. But you can see also there is a close collaboration. You see a couple of hematologists between that. It's a good team. Then finally, and then I'm at the end, close collaboration. What we experience in Europe, we can't get anywhere if you just talk about CML. In the policy level, we need to talk about rare cancers. We need to talk outside of our disease, because otherwise politicians take the excuse that they can't do a single disease policy. So we've advocated very heavily on the European Cancer Patients Bill of Rights, which we signed in the European Parliament on World Cancer Day on 4th of February. So I had the pleasure to be part of that. We had been one of the founding members. Sandy Crane is in there as the UK representative. I'm in there for CML Advocates. Jana is in there for ECPC. So we co-founded a multi-stakeholder activity on rare cancers, where we have also sarcomas and many other friends in there. And we also try to bring the different hematology groups together at EHA to have some kind of joint strategy between patient organizations to really talk about what is the needs of the hematology patient community and not only CML. So that has moved us quite a bit forward. And I'm just putting the headline that CML community is seen as a role model for patient advocacy, because many people see how much a patient network informally can accomplish by working together. And basically, at the end, I asked the question in the survey, how could the CML Advocates Network help? I have 58 more seconds. I see that on the
No, that's including the question and answers.
Oh my God. Well, they said you're already very active. They said help sharing successful initiatives, more CML groups engaging also in the European level, strengthening collaboration projects, addressing generics, do the 2013 version of the ELN recommendations. And maybe we discussed this morning, a CML Advocates in Research group, which might be a European or global activity. So a lot of things we can do, but actually there are not many hands. We need more hands. There are many European groups in here. Join us, do some of that, help us, and we're going to be more successful even in the future. So that's it, and those are basically the groups, part of the network. It's great to have you, and it's great you're all in Europe at the moment. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Jan. We don't have much time for the coffee break, so maybe any question? Yes, please.
Jan, I have a question. I observed in your presentation about the challenges facing the CML patients in Europe. Well, one strange phenomenon I observed in your presentation is that for the whole European Union, including the Western EU and then both the Eastern EU, access to drug is not a problem to the patients. But this is a common phenomenon to majority of CML patients. So can you explain why is that? Is it because the people are very rich in EU, or the government is subsidized a lot, or you have a very innovative health insurance scheme?
It's a very complex issue, and time's up. That's what the the board says. No, it's a difficult issue. If you see green, if it's of course not fully green. In some countries like Germany, you have access to all the drugs. In some countries, you have access to imatinib and nilotinib, but not dasatinib. In some countries, you have access to all second-generation TKIs, but only after first-line failure. In some countries, you don't. If you move more east, it's even getting difficult with the second-generation general, depending on where you're being treated and which hospital you're in. So it's very incoherent. I would say that the strategies of the countries are very different. In the UK, we have a very strict health technology assessment body, and they basically define the threshold, how much a life is worth. And if the drug costs basically exceed that threshold, they're not giving the therapy or not recommending the reimbursement. And there are special cancer drug funds to get around that, but it's more or less sometimes a postcode lottery where people live, whether they get one drug or the other one. So I would say every country approaches it from a different field. In Germany, we had the luck that the health technology assessment law was introduced after the TKIs were approved. So the next drugs will probably have more trouble. So it really depends on the member state level, but surely it also depends on the economy of the countries, and the Western European countries are doing quite well in comparison to other countries, and that's probably the reason why it has not been as severe as in other regions. But if you have specific question about a certain country, we can do that in a coffee break.
Yeah, and just one short question. In one of your slides, there is a mention of the German CML study group. Is that connected with the CML research group you're contemplating on creating?
No, the CML study group is really a group of investigators in Germany. But we are working very closely with them. So I personally, my organization is working with them very closely. Also on the adherence study, we did a lot and so on. But it's not related directly to the research group.
What is a short question? I have a longer question, and it's actually for you, and I think we'll close the session with it. It's for you, Jan, and also for the other speakers from the different regions. We heard about regional meetings like the meeting of CML Africa, Rising Sun, Alianza Latina, and Max Foundation meeting in South America. In some of these meetings, there was participation of CML Advocate Network member, but in most of them, there was not. Do you think that it's important in order to tie the bonds between the regions and CML Advocate Global Network to assure that we all participate in those meetings, or do you think that CML Horizons once a year is enough? What is your opinion?
So you're asking about the European CML meeting?
No, I'm asking if the participation of CML Advocate Network members in regional meeting will help to improve the ties and the bonds and the understanding of the issues of the regions, because today there is no strong participation. Once in a while, when we go to present, for example, the ADHERE survey, which was presented in Alianza Latina, or like Rising Sun invited one of us to come to present it this year in Rising Sun. Unfortunately, we cannot go. But in most meetings, CML Advocate Network is not presented. And my question is, what do you think, and the other regions, is it important, or is it enough that we meet once a year and we share the issues and challenges of the regions?
I have a comment. So in all the regional meetings, which I know well, the steering committee member of the CML Advocates Network is a member of the organizing committee of the regional meeting. So I think the bond is very strong. And in all the meetings that I have attended, which I think is almost all, either I or the person that's the steering committee member has presented the CML Advocates Network. We do a lot of work recruiting organizations to become members, and that's why it's grown so much. So I'm not sure what you say, there's no direct bond, because to me that's the role of the regional representative of the CML Advocates Network to make that link between the two conferences. Yeah.
Great. Thank you.